school choice, ESAs, vouchers. These are terms that were thrown around quite a bit last year in the Texas legislature. Well, get ready because you're going to hear a lot more about these when the next legislative session kicks off in January of next year. But what does it all mean? Are you as confused about all of this as I am? And could all this really be socialism? We answer all of these questions on today's episode of the Patriots Revival podcast with our guest, Caitlin Landry, Communications Director for Texans for Homeschool Freedom. You don't want to miss this episode. Stay tuned. Well, Caitlin, thank you so very much for joining us today on the Patriots Revival podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So as you may remember, I met you at the Texas GOP convention. You guys had a booth there, and you are with Texans for Homeschool Freedom. I wanted to bring you on today because I myself have a lot of questions about school choice. But before we get into that, maybe tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and how you got involved with this organization.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a homeschool mom of three, and we're currently in Midland, but we moved around a lot. We're Texans originally, but we were living in California for a while, and that's actually where I began my homeschool journey during COVID. and we knew we were trying to get back home to Texas, and we knew that we were going to be moving back fairly soon. And at that time, this was during session the Texas legislative session of 2021. And the Tim Tebow bill was the hot button issue at the time for homeschoolers. And if you're not familiar with that, that was wanting to allow homeschoolers to participate in UIL sports and extracurriculars through the public schools.
Okay.
And our organization, Texas for Homeschool Freedom, we were concerned about that because we knew that it would come with testing strings and things like that, which it did end up ultimately coming with that. And knowing that our home was going to be Texas again soon and I'd be homeschooling there, I got plugged in with the group through Facebook and read up on everything, educated myself on what was going on. And then we did end up moving back shortly after that to Texas, thankfully. So good to be home.
Yes.
And then the hot button issue, it's been around for a while, but it's really ramped up a lot in the last two sessions. It was school choice. I have friends here who also homeschool who, we were all concerned about what this would mean, more government involvement in our homeschool, there's public money involved. And so we reached out to Bussy Howe, who was the president of our organization, and we asked her to come and speak to us out here in Midland, and she did. And we formed a friendship, and I guess last legislative session, I helped organize the Capitol Day for our group to go up to the Capitol and meet with representatives about our concerns.
And that was for the 88th legislative session in 2023?
Yeah, yes, sorry, the past one, 2023. And then this fast forward, thankfully, nothing went through. It was defeated, and it never even really made it out of the Public Education Committee. Then I was asked to become the communications director for the group earlier this year. After all of that, so kind of a long way to say that I'm the communications director. But that's kind of
Okay.
I used to work for a political consulting firm when I was right out of college for a few years until I started having kids.
So tell us a little bit about, I know you mentioned Faith, and tell us a little bit about how what the logic was in her forming the organization.
Well, it actually predates Faith, and it was formed just basically the title says it all.
Okay.
We're a grassroots organization of concerned parents and homeschoolers and taxpayers who want to make sure that Texas is one of the freest states in the country to homeschool. We have virtually no regulations. We don't have to report to the state that we're homeschooling. We don't have to take standardized tests. We don't have to send in progress reports or anything like that, like a lot of other states do. We are so vigilant in making sure that we get to stay that way. And so we don't want that government involvement. We don't want that government cheese
Yeah.
that, comes with the trap. That's why it was formed, and we're still, you know, our vision, our dream would be to be a resource for homeschoolers in the state with, if they need legal help and, connecting people and, networking and that kind of thing. But we feel like we're constantly in this triage state of playing whack-a-mole and beating down these bad bills and doing
Yes.
such meetings and all of that. So that's kind of been our main focus for the majority of the times that we've been in organizations.
Okay. Let's get into school choice because I will admit I myself don't know enough about it. And I want to talk a little bit about, I think there was a bill that was proposed, or if you recall, Governor Abbott we had last year was the year of endless extra sessions, and he kept putting it on the agenda that we will get school choice done. And I think there was some legislation, if I recall, and gosh, that just seems like forever ago because of the crazy political cycle we've had this year. I didn't really understand some of what was presented. If I recall, something may have passed in the Senate, but died in the House. But help educate us on this, because what I've had issues with is vouchers and government strings. And I know we can get into that a little bit more, but maybe let's first talk about the push for school choice within our state government and some of the legislation that did get presented in the last session, or the extra sessions, I should say.
Yeah, so there were several, but a lot of them kind of fell by the wayside. The main one that got a lot of attention was Senate Bill 8 that Senator Creighton authored. It proposed $8,000. So, okay, let's get some terminology straight. School choice, we have learned, I learned at convention working the booth, that some people don't fully understand what we're talking about when we say school choice. Now, like, well, why are you against that? We're not talking about school of choice within the public school system, getting to move districts or getting to a school within your district. That's not what we're talking about here.
Okay.
We are talking about public money going to private education options like private schools and homeschools. And again, we can get into all the concerns of that, the government concerns later. But this SB8 proposed in an education savings accounts and vouchers they tried to kind of rename things to kind of
Yeah.
see them better, parental empowerment, school choice, all of that.
Yes.
And it's basically the same thing. Education savings accounts are still the government putting money in the account. It's not actually like a health savings account where it's your own tax-free money. This is actually them putting money into an account for you. So in SB8, they wanted an education savings account, $8,000 per child per year. And that was for private school. They ended up carving out $1,000 per year for homeschoolers, but these programs always expand. They always get bigger. But there were strings with that money. They wanted, and a lot of people don't know this either, private schools in Texas don't have to be accredited. They don't have to be accredited. WIS is if you took this money, the private school that you attended had to be accredited. And there was a standardized testing string as well.
For the if this had passed, you're saying, and a parent put their child in a private school, you're saying standardized testing would be applicable
Yes.
in, at that institution.
Yes. Mhm.
Okay.
Yes. And so this passed the Senate. It got stuck in the House.
Right.
Didn't go anywhere. But then there was HB1 that was kind of like an omnibus bill, really. It had teacher pay and all kinds of things in it. But the Senate wanted to tack on their ESA provisions from SB8 onto House Bill 1. And so they did. And when that happened, that's when everything kind of fell apart. And it ended up not going anywhere and dying. So nothing thankfully passed this past session. A lot of times too, how a bill is written, it's going to change. We've seen it happen time and time again. We've seen it happen in other states with this particular issue. They expand the program, they spend more, they make it universal instead of just for a certain people who qualify for whatever parameters it was under. And where a lot of the minutia and control comes in is from the bureaucrats who are put in charge of running the day to day. Like homeschooling was totally fine in Texas until one bureaucrat at the TEA decided that it wasn't, and that homeschoolers were subject to the compulsory attendance law that was passed in the 80s. This guy, this bureaucrat, unelected bureaucrat, decided this, and so then it became, for all intents and purposes, illegal to homeschool in the state until these families in Arlington sued their school district for coming after them for truancy. And we had Lieber versus Arlington ISD was the Supreme Court case that came about. And the Supreme Court case decided, no, actually, we are considered our own private school and we are not subject to the compulsory attendance to the public schools. And so when that happened in 1994, we were free to homeschool again, but the legislature did nothing for the 13 years that it was illegal. They did
Wow.
nothing. And so our freedoms are basically in a court case, legal precedent through a court case. And so that's why we are always so concerned when legislation comes across that tries to separate us from private schools in some way or try to define us differently than Leaper did. And so it's very, you can get all of that to say a lot of the things can come through that affect us and affect our freedom, even if it's not in the bill.
Yeah. Yeah. I want you to help me and any of our others in the audience because we know that we're starting another session or another legislative session will kick off in January. And we know that this is probably going to be a top item. Although, if I recall, I don't think this was one of the legislative board.
It did not make the top 8.
Yeah.
But it is, the governor.
Yes. He continues to
Steve,
push on.
they're encouraging him to make it an emergency item and all of these. It's coming. We're gearing up.
So I want to go over just a few things on your handout that I got from your booth at the convention. You have some great bullet points on here, and maybe we just hit on some of these because, again, I want to educate our audience on this. So when we hear the word school choice being thrown around, your very first point is don't be fooled. Texas already has school choice because parents are completely free to educate their children in public or private schools. That's kind of what I think. Maybe you want to expand on that a little bit for our audience.
We do have the choice. They have co-opted this language to try to make it sound more appealing, like I was saying. We already have choice. You can send your child to private school. You can send your child to public school. You can homeschool, or you can do in hybrids. Like here in Midland, there's a school that is the private school, but in the grammar years, it's also the parents are co-teachers and you have home days as well. So there's all kinds of things. And in Texas, you're free to choose which one you want. It's just not subsidized by the government. The private options aren't subsidized by the government. And we want to keep it that way because we know that what the government funds, the government runs. We're seeing this in other states. We actually, I don't know if you're familiar with the Cornerstone School in San Antonio.
I don't think
there's
so.
Cornerstone Church and then there's a private school. And a while back, there was a Muslim family that wanted to attend, but one of the requirements that the school had was that at least one parent had to be a professing Christian for admission to the school. And that wasn't the case for this family. And so they didn't get in. And the family went to the media and, was talking about how they weren't allowed to be in the school. But it came out that the school was perfectly within its legal rights to have those admission requirements.
Because it's a private school, right?
Because they were completely privately funded. It did not take any government money whatsoever. And if you start having these ESA vouchers, whatever the flavor of the week is that they're calling it, when you have that happening, the schools are going to start to lose their autonomy. And it's happening in Maine. So they had a Supreme Court case a while back, and their Supreme Court came and said, oh, it is legal for public money to go to parochial schools. So everyone was like, oh, yeah. And we were like, oh, no problem. And fast forward to now, And their parochial schools are finding that if they are not eligible for that money, or they can't take that money unless they concede to the LGBTQ policies and that kind of thing. So I mean, but it's really not surprising when you look that you take government money, you're gonna have with the shekels come the shackles.
So let me ask you a question to kind of follow up your example of the Muslim. I think you said they're Muslim family, correct? That one of the requirements of that private school was for one of the parents to be a professing Christian, and they sued, and thankfully law was upheld. But if I'm understanding you right, if something like this happens in Texas where private schools are receiving funds from the state of Texas, then could people not claim that they're being discriminated against or whatever? Am I on the right path here?
Right, yeah, and that's the concern, that the private schools would lose their autonomy to make the
Yeah.
decision about what, what they are and do as a school.
So another question I have related to those vouchers or ESAs or whatever you want to call them, because in going back to what you mentioned, and I think you said it was SB 8 or whatever it was, the $8,000, that money's got to come from somewhere. So that means me, a Texas taxpayer, I would have to pay. I mean, my dollars are going to fund someone to go to a private school. And what I have a problem with, and help me understand this, because again, you're helping me navigate this. If legislation passes where this comes about, and we move forward with that, let's say that if there's a parent that currently they're in the public school system, but they want to send their child to and I'm just making this up,
Yeah.
okay, a satanic school. Let's say that they focus on Satanism, and that's a thing. That's part of their core learning. Am I understanding this right? That means me as a taxpayer, I'm paying for that child to be educated in a satanic school. Again, all hypothetical.
And of course, of course we have examples, but
Right.
yes, in theory, the public money, they can't discriminate the public money.
Wow.
So, and yeah, yeah. And we're also not talking about pocket change. This is a lot of money. And our governor has even, like 2 years ago, he was at a private school press conference, and we have a video of it. And he's talking about school choice. He admits that there will be accountability to the state with any school choice funds that get doled out. And so you can't, it's just, the idea all the way around it's not a conservative idea. It's really, it's welfare, and it's education welfare in a way.
Yeah.
I've had conversations, and I said, okay, with people who support it, who, claim to be conservative, and I say, okay, well, are you for universal basic income? No. Are you for universal health care? No. Are you for forgiving student loan debt? No. Okay. Well, why are you for universal school choice?
Well,
Yeah, and you'd see an answer, and they just say, I had one person say, well, it's better than the alternatives, what we currently have. I'm like, well, that's not an answer.
so, and when I've had this, I haven't gotten into deep discussions about this, because anytime it's brought up with me, I just say, you know what, I don't know enough about it to really comment, but here's what I'm thinking. And I've had some people in some of the discussions is they'll say, okay, Melody, but don't you want to give somebody an opportunity that maybe can't afford it now? Maybe they live in a very bad neighborhood, and they don't have access to private school, or they can't really afford it.
But the truth of the matter is, for a lot of the kids, but they claim that they're wanting to help with this, that they would give these children, the kids are not, their access to private schools is not going to change. It's not going to be improved. They, a lot of times, still won't be able to afford it. And or how are they going to get there and back to the school? The transportation isn't there. Whether or not they get accepted to the school in the first place. I mean, based on academics, we would say that if the public money is going to a school, then the school might not be able to pick and choose the way that they used to as far as other factors. But the child's access likely isn't actually going to change with this. And actually, I think it's Arizona. He get to Arizona. It was a really high percentage of kids who were already in private schools who were using this money. Not from the kids, from the majority of the kids that were using it were already in private school. I would also like to bring up a few arguments that people have, since you said that's one thing that people ask you about. Oh, well, don't you want to help the kids? It's always that. That's always the fallback when there's not any other solid argument. Because, oh, don't you want to help the kids? Well, there's a lot of ways to help kids. It doesn't have to be this. But so one of the things that we hear a lot is, well, it's my money. I'm paying for a public school system that I don't use, or that I don't agree with, and that I don't send my kids to, and I'd like to have that back. Well, okay, you say it's your money. The state, once it leaves your pocket, the state doesn't see it as your money anymore. It's their money. And if they're doling it back to you, it's going to come with strings. So let's keep our money in the first place.
Yeah.
Like, we are all for keeping our money in the first place and spending it as we see fit for our family without having to have the strings attached. That's a tax reform issue. We're confusing, we're trying to put these things together, education reform and tax reform, but they're separate things. And that's a tax reform issue. So tackle the tax reform, leave the education out of it so that there's no regulations attached to the money. Another argument that we hear is, well, just opt out if you don't want the money. Like, don't steal the opportunity for others. If you don't want the money and the strings that come with it, just don't take it. I have a couple things to say to that. We have seen in several states that property taxes have increased when they have choice legislation pass. And you can't opt out of your taxes. Secondly, if you're sending your child to a school that starts taking public money, your kids are probably still going to be subjected to the strain because of the other kids. Indiana and Ohio are two examples of schools that, if they have, one of them is like, oh, as a certain percentage of students are on vouchers or whatever, then the whole school has to take a standardized test. And the other one was, I think, even if they just took one ESA voucher student or whatever, then everybody did. One, it was a certain percentage threshold, and the other. And so you can't opt out. You can't always opt out of that if you're in that kind of situation. And then we also see we have two classes of homeschoolers then, from a homeschooling perspective. You'd have the ones who don't take the government money, and so therefore are not answering to the government, aren't reporting to the government, aren't testing. There's no metrics on your children. And then you have the ones who take the money and they've done the testing, they've done all these things, and so they have all these metrics. Which one's going to seem like the more official homeschooler?
Yeah.
As far as the state's concerned.
Yeah.
The one that you have all this data on, and this is already happening in Louisiana. They have the home education route once you hit high school. And if you don't follow, if you don't jump through their hoops, through their at-home education program and don't do what they say and all of these things, then you're not eligible. Like, Louisiana have what's called TOPS, and it's free state school tuition if you maintain a certain GPA. Well, if you don't homeschool high school through their home education program, you're not eligible for TOPS, and your diploma is not really recognized like it would be. So we don't want a situation like that either.
Yeah.
Well, well, just opt out, or, well, it's my money. Well, not really.
So I have one more follow-up question about those vouchers or ESAs, because I know that the public education community is very much against it, or at least some of the teachers that I know and have, they've asked me about it, and they've said, Melody, this is going to cause, maybe this friend of mine is a teacher at this little bitty public school here in Texas, very small school, and she raised concerns that, okay, well, the school choice and these vouchers are going to cause us to lose everybody in our district because they're going to want to go to a nearby district that might be better and have better facilities and whatever it may be. So I do want to ask about the homeschool aspect of it, but before we move on, can you talk a little bit about how, had that legislation gone through, and if we're going to see that again in the 89th session, what does that look like for a public school system?
Yeah, so I'm gonna be honest. I don't know all the ins and outs of
Okay.
how it would affect public school. Eventually, they would lose the money that they get for that student being in their seats, in their seat.
Yeah.
They've got the attendance money they get, whatever, based on the days that the child's there. Like I said, there were several bills that came across, but I believe it was in SB 8 that they added in that for the first 2 years, maybe, they were going to be giving not only the $8,000 to the family for that child, they were going to be giving the school district like $10,000 per year for that child. So eventually, yes, it would.
It would affect them in the long run, maybe, or
It would, for the ones who chose to leave, and again, it depends on how the bill is written.
Mhm.
A lot of times they all start out, there's a big push for universal. It's for everybody. Same money for everybody. A lot of times it does start out kind of smaller for, certain income level or school rating, for the worst schools and that kind of thing. So eventually, yes, we would see kind of that happening, but at least the way that SB 8 was written, we'd be hemorrhaging a lot of money.
Yeah.
But this popped into my mind after we already left the like common arguments and rebuttals, but I wanted to make sure that I point this out as well.
Sure.
So like SB 8, back to it's my money.
Mhm.
It's not just your money. Is you're getting $8,000 per child per year. I have 3 kids. If I weren't homeschooling, and again, eventually it would probably include homeschoolers too, but the way SB 8 at least was written was for private schoolers, you'd get $8,000 per kid per year. That for my family would be $24,000 a year. And I don't come close to paying that in school taxes. So I'm getting way more back than I'm putting out for school taxes.
Wow.
And so it's not just my money that I'm getting back, and that is welfare.
Yeah, it is. I mean,
So,
and then you talked about universal. That kind of screams socialism, doesn't it?
it absolutely does, and I think that was one of the bullet points that we
Yeah.
put on the flyer. It's not. We might have taken that part out, but it is.
More you.
Okay.
Yeah, you've got it on here. It says, "Can you say socialism? School choice legislation has been just another welfare program that requires the government to take other people's money and redistribute it." That's why I can't believe we, as the Republican Party, that this is an issue that's being pushed, because if this were about any other issue, transportation, what if this was an issue where people don't have access to go buy a decent car to get to and from work? I kind of don't really, in healthcare, I don't really see that this is I mean,
I know.
it's in the same line. So
That's been what we've said too. Like I don't understand it. I think this push has been happening for a while, and it's really blown up a lot. Really since COVID, I think they saw their chance to really, put the fear in people and want to give them that escape from the public school system. But I'm like, how is it escaping? If you're escaping the government school, but asking the government to pay for your escape route, like how you're
yeah.
still going to be under that government umbrella, and they're going to eventually tell you what to do, if not from the beginning.
Why do you think it's being pushed? Kind of what
There's
it?
a lot of money to be made. The people who administer the program get to keep a percentage of the money. And then you're going to have things like pre-approved vendors. Oh, well, if you're using this money, you can buy from these people. You're also going to have the testing companies are going to be making more money because they're going to have more kids testing. There's also a lot of data to be captured on kids who aren't currently in the system. You know, there's about in Texas, I think there's 250,000 private school kids and about ish, and the homeschoolers don't have to report to the state. So this is just kind of a guesstimate,
Yeah.
but 750,000 homeschoolers. It's a million kids who aren't, you know, in the system having to do all of these things and where they're able to grab the data and the metrics about them and all this stuff. And yeah.
With that said, I'm guessing, because I know we've talked a lot about the public school aspect of, or a little bit, the private school aspect, but talk a little bit about the homeschoolers, because when I saw this at your booth, and then I talked to you, and I've talked to other people that homeschool, they're very much against it. You've kind of talked a little bit about it with how you're now going to be falling under these, you'll now be, what's the word? Tracked, and you'll fall under that umbrella. Is that correct? So is that really help our audience understand? Because somebody might say, well, why do homeschoolers care about school choice or not? So maybe talk a little bit about that. I think you already did, but maybe just expand on it a little bit.
It's all about it goes back to just saying it again and again. What the government funds, the government runs. Like in California, when we were there, there's a couple different routes that you can homeschool, but one of them is you homeschool through a charter, which is public school, and they give you money, but they get to approve your curriculum. You have to meet with a charter school rep regularly to show them what you're doing and show them progress. And I have a friend who's no longer in California, but when she was homeschooling through the charter program, she couldn't even buy a book about reindeer with these funds because it had Christmas in the title.
Oh,
Wait, you're getting that public money. They get to tell you what to do. And then, or go give you another example. In Missouri, they implemented a couple years ago money for homeschoolers, and there were multiple streams, but one of them was that if you homeschool and you take this money, everyone in your household over the age of 18 has to undergo a background check.
oh my gosh. I think is that, you said that's Missouri?
Yeah, it's Missouri.
I think I've heard about that.
Scholar program or something like that.
Yeah, because I thought, wow, so you've got a parent who's probably teaching their children, so you're basically saying they've got to pass a background check to teach children in their own home. That's just ludicrous.
It is. And we don't want that coming close to even touching us here in Texas.
Right, yeah, okay.
And the testing, we've already seen it. There's a testing requirement involved when the public money comes in the education realm. And so the homeschoolers don't teach to test right now. We have the freedom to teach our kids based on the curriculum that we want and the worldview that we want and all of these things. And if we start to take money and have to take these tests, well, we're going to start teaching our kids to pass the test.
Yeah.
And we're not going to give them this richer education full of true knowledge and teaching them how to learn and enjoy learning.
Yeah.
And so there's just too many concerns.
So I have one more question for you about this. And, I hear from my friends and others that say, but it's working in Florida, or it's working in this state or that state. I know you talked a little bit about Louisiana, but tell me what someone like myself or others who are not really sure about this and may not be for school choice and ESAs, how we should respond
I
to.
would tell them to take a closer look at those states. First of all, they're fairly new. So in all of those states, Arizona, Utah, Oklahoma, Florida are some of the ones who recently passed the universal school choice. So just keep watching them. Arizona has a busted budget already. They've blown through what they thought they were going to spend on this program. And the parents are also starting to get disillusioned because they're starting to introduce more things that they have to do for the money. And Florida was not as free as Texas when they implemented this. And so sometimes it's an apples to oranges comparison because we are so free here, and a lot of other states already have regulations that have been implemented this. And so, well, they've already got the regulations in place. So it's kind of hard to, like in Florida, the kids have to take a standardized test. If they opt out of the standardized test, they have to do a psych evaluation. They have to meet with, they get to choose which they want to do. But
Wow.
testing or get this evaluation. And so they already have things in place. Yes, they did just pass universal school choice, but they already had regulations that we don't have and we don't want.
Yeah. So I guess you guys are probably getting geared up for the next legislative session, and you'll probably be down in Austin a lot. And what I would say to kind of wrap up is, how can folks stay connected with you and your organization? I'm assuming you might do alerts if there's an important hearing or if something makes it to a vote. How can folks be connected with Texans for Homeschool Freedom?
Yes, so we have our website is texansforhomeschoolfreedom.com, and we have an email sign up on our website. Just enter your email and you'll get our updates and our newsletters and any action alerts that's sent when session starts. We'll be following the legislation really closely. We hope to do at least one Capitol Day where we get a ton of people up there to, show them, hey, we're here, and meet with the representatives, and please sign up for our emails. We also have a Facebook group, Texans for Homeschool Freedom. There's a lot of conversation there about all of this, and we do put action alerts and calls to action and all of that out there as well. So yeah, those are our main two ways to contact us. We're very, very grassroots. So that means we don't have a lot of money or manpower. We are all volunteer positions, but we're very passionate about this. And so we are doing our best to stay on top of it and try to educate others about what's going on.
So on your website, do you have an option if folks want to donate? Because if you're making trips to the Capitol or whatever,
Yes.
you're putting out literature, obviously there's a cost involved in that.
Yes,
So is there a way for folks to donate on your website?
Yes, we have a donate button on our website, and it takes you to a Give, Send, Go platform to donate. And yes, that's always very welcome as well. It does. The travel involved and the flyers that need to be printed and all of that. It does add up.
Yeah.
And our email hosting platform and all of that. So
Yeah. Lots of costs involved in that and keeping everybody up to date. So, well, Caitlin, thank you so much for joining us here today on Patriots Revival. I really appreciate the information. I feel like you've enlightened me, and thanks to this conversation, I feel a lot more educated on the subject, and it's a lot of what I thought, but I just wanted to bring on someone like yourself to kind of straighten me out a little bit.
well, I so appreciate it.
Thank you for being with us today, Caitlin. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Well, folks, that wraps up our interview with Miss Caitlin Landry of Texans for Homeschool Freedom. I really hope that the information that she shared with us today opened your eyes and maybe educated you a little bit more about this issue. I know it did for me. And as we mentioned in the interview, get ready because the Texas legislative session, the 89th session, will open in January, and this will be discussed. Now, there's one more thing that I wanted to share with you, some additional information that Caitlin and I didn't get to after we hit record, but I wanted to share it with you. And that's the fact that when you think about school choice, you also have to think about inflation. You know, inflation is an economic reality when the government floods the market with money. And we've already seen this in so many areas of life, but specific to education, we saw it in college tuition prices rising once the government started subsidizing. And in states like North Carolina and Arizona that have school choice, they have already raised their prices for their tuition. And what happens is when they have their school choice monies doled out based on financial need, this really hits hard for families who don't qualify for the education savings account or the voucher. And even in the last legislative session, as we had several that were related, even some of the special sessions that were related to school choice, there were some folks from Catholic schools that they mentioned that if the vouchers pass in Texas, they would admittedly raise tuition rates. So think about that. And your altar call for this week is to go to Texans for Homeschool Freedom's website, subscribe to their emails, and get on their alert list so that if this is the burr under your saddle, as Matt Long says, or the hair on your biscuit that I say, you can be informed, because I guarantee you the next legislative session, this topic will be discussed and probably even have some votes that come across the House or Senate floor for school choice and vouchers and education savings accounts that we talked about today. Each week we end every episode of Patriots Revival with Psalm 119:25 that says, "Though I lie in the dust, revive me by your word." Dust off that Bible. Dust off that Bible, folks. Spend some time in God's word. Hopefully it will revive your faith and revive your inner patriot. That's all we have for you this week. We'll see you next time on Patriots Revival. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed the show, please follow us and tell others. If today's show revived your faith and your inner patriot, join the Patriots Revival Facebook group by going to facebook.com/groups/Patriots Revival for resources on how to get involved in being salt and light in a world of darkness. Are you local to the Ellis County, Texas area? If so, check out the Patriots Revival podcast, The Local Show, for info on local issues, candidates and elections, a calendar of events of conservative organizations in the area, and ways for you to get involved. Finally, if you would like to contribute to the production costs of the Patriots Revival podcast, you can do so through Zelle by inputting info@patriotsrevival.com as the recipient. Thanks again for listening. I hope you have a reviving week.